rising levels of extortion and construction mafias in the country is really concerning. Extortion is the practice of taking property or money by force or through threats. Now, a number of provinces across the country have declared war on these crimes, with the latest incident being the gunning down of 6 suspected extortionists in a shootout with police earlier this month. In a separate incident, a gang of 4 extortionists were also killed in a shootout with police in Milnerton in Cape Town. But for more on this, we are joined now by criminal law expert Ian Allis. Ian, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, I wonder about the wording that we're using here. What we say, the rising number of extortion cases is concerning. Is the number rising, or are we finally paying attention to a problem that has always been there? Let's start with that one.
Good morning, Naledi, and good morning to the viewers. It's actually a combination of both, because what has happened is that the numbers, it's always been a problem, but it hasn't been viewed as major a problem as it is now, and also it hasn't been as prolific as it is now on the scale that it is. We've always had racketeering and that form of extortion in different ways, but it's usually been something that tended to be more a one-on-one or a smaller protection, if one could call it, syndicate operating, but it hasn't been to this level that one is seen, where you've got these major cartels where the sheer force that the extortionists are showing up with, the guns, the ammunition, the power, the tour de force that they actually have, is at the level that we've seen that it was previously. It is by far more extensive, and it's hitting different industries where it wouldn't have usually been as much of a problem, because it's now hitting the mainstream business and not just your small corner type of shops and your questionable areas for small pocket change, if one could call it.
Yeah, you know, there's I suppose even the question I asked could also be seen as, I suppose, a chicken or egg situation, right? Where one could easily argue, and I'm putting the idea forward here, Ian, that because of the lack of attention being given to it, that you have those numbers starting to rise. And I raised that. This is after, at the beginning of this month, the Eastern Cape Premier, Oscar Mabuyane, did, of course, concede to the fact that the province was without a head of intelligence for, what, close to a year, right? So, I mean, does that surprise you?
Not at all. The problem is that the police are heavily under-resourced, and now we're going to have a potential another special investigation unit that will last for a couple of months until they run out of money, make a few arrests. The minister and the various commissioners will pat themselves on the back, and then we'll be back to the same problem in another year's time. So the problem is with no resources, it's giving an opportunity for these syndicates to grow. They're actually more better manned than the police are. They've got better intelligence than the police actually have at this present moment.
And then, of course, you've got the situation where even if you are running investigations, who do you speak to and who do you not? I mean, that's where the difficulty is the blurry lines, right? When you hear from King Dalindyebo, who says there are government officials in very senior positions who are part of these syndicates, then who do you go to assist to assist with the cleanup?
That's actually a very difficult question, and it's one normally you'd say you need to go to the police, you need to report these crimes, but the problem is that with the elements of the corruption that's extended into these syndicates, police are involved, politicians are involved, senior officials are involved. It's very, very difficult to actually know who to trust, and that's why a lot of this goes unreported and under the radar, because of who may well be backing these syndicates, and that creates worse danger for the people and their families.
I think about how police in cases that I touched on in my introduction there have responded, right? So you've had shootouts in the past, I'd say just under a week. In fact, 4 suspected extortionists are shot down in Eastern Cape. 3 suspected extortionists are killed in a shootout in Milnerton in Cape Town. And, you know, there's, of course, the fact that or exposing communities to violence, but this is in response to violence. I mean, is there a better way of handling it without having to resort to the shootouts between police and the suspected criminals?
Well, here comes the other aspect, and that is when there's a shootout and you break it down to the basic fundamentals. The only reason why there is the shootouts is because these guys are so heavily armed. If they were not as heavily armed, there wouldn't be the need for the shootouts, so the violence would de-escalate. The problem is these guys are going in there with army-grade ammunition and guns. The police are equally as much at risk from being shot and killed as the criminals are, because they are so well armed. And that's where the scary aspect actually comes. And how do you stop that? Because of the elements of corruption that they are getting hold of the arms that they are in actual fact getting hold of. These are automatic rifles. They've got handguns. Where are they coming from? And the problem comes is that they're actually coming from within the specific ranks of certain places like the defense force, the police force. So that goes to the underlying basis of the corruption.
Yeah,
so how do you go ahead and battle that? You're battling them with your own arms. With they're fighting you with your own ammunition.
Yeah, and then you've got the EFF that has now tabled this, resolution in Parliament calling for a parliamentary investigation into the impact of extortion, right? They want a multi-party ad hoc committee to be formed to probe the full extent of extortion in KZN, Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. Do we need another committee?
Unfortunately, politicians and their committees just becomes another way for another bit of money to be made in the short term of meetings and holidays. The last thing we need is another committee meeting about what is wrong. They know exactly what is wrong. They need to find a solution of what to deal with it and how to deal with it to shut it down. Not to have another party and discuss what needs to be done. And they know what needs to be done.
Yeah. So
it's just another waste of taxpayers' money.
So just after 8 o'clock, my colleague Aldrin St-Pierre is, of course, in the Eastern Cape this morning, and he'll be in conversation with the Premier of the Eastern Cape, Oscar Mabuyane. What does he then say? I mean, when you look at, the cases that are coming out of the Eastern Cape, if you were the Premier and you had a plan to deal with extortion in your province, what would it sound like? What is it that the Premier needs to say this morning that can restore the confidence of businesses, schools, healthcare facilities functioning in the Eastern Cape, afraid that they may not very well be able to do so for very long because of the danger that presents itself in the form of extortionists?
The biggest thing is you've got to start looking internally at how these are actually happening, at where these syndicates are coming from. Yes, they're lacking the head of intelligence, but the fact is they need to start investigating internally where these syndicates are actually targeting. How they get into those syndicates, what is the background to it? It's actually quite an in-depth study, because you've almost got to take a look at which are your markets and who are the people who are most vulnerable to this extortion and why are they most vulnerable. Yes, it's a financial aspect, but also when it comes with extortion is seen as an easy crime for the cartel dealing with it. So when one actually needs to look at it, they need to look at how these guys are getting supplied in a shootout. Where did they get these arms from? Where did they get the necessary information from? Where did their intel start coming from? And then you'll be able to cut to at least start killing the cancer from within your organization, which will go ahead and put pressure when it comes to going outside of the organization and stops the recruitment of the people for the extortion syndicates, and also controls their opportunities to procure arms, to procure details of of what is going on within those market sectors, who are the vulnerable parties, and it puts them under a bit of threat. You need to go ahead and look at it. They are a competing business with you. You're in law enforcement, they're in law, and if one could call it, almost disenforcement. So they need to go ahead and be curtailed at that level. Look at them as how you would go ahead and take on any opposing party and any opposing competitor to start to get your share back.
Yeah, you know, if you look at some of the cases, though, where KZN is concerned, Ian, it gets, perhaps I argue that it gets a little bit more difficult to then try and make sense of where the wrong starts, right? Because there is, of course, the argument around the need for transformation, the need for communities to participate in their economy. But then you've got 8 billion rand projects like the Newzroom water project that have been delayed for decades. And that's because of, you know, in some instances, you've got business forums that say they want a part of a certain project. So where do we start to draw the line between transformation, business forums wanting to be a part of the growing of their local economy, and then just construction mafias and extortion?
You see, the problem is, it's when does one factor lead into another and lead into another? Because the problem is, you've also got a huge amount that is stemming from corrupt activities internally, and everybody wanting a piece of the pie, and everybody trying to go ahead and force their way, good, bad, or indifferent, in an indifferent fashion. And that's where the danger is coming. So the rot has already started, and unfortunately, how you're going to curtail that rot and stop that rot starts from the internal policies, and starting to say, you know what, as important as transformation can in actual fact be and should be, and the priority that should in actual fact take, there must also be the safety of the community and not just building the pockets of a small elect few. And that's where the distinction in actual fact comes. The extortion is not coming from the small members of the community trying to go ahead and build something. It's coming from the top and the heads and the big players in it. And that's where it's starting to become a bigger factor.
Yeah, Ian, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us. And of course, a quick clarity there on my part. Newzroom water project is in fact in the Eastern Cape, and perhaps something that will be touched on as well by the Premier at around 8:15 when he is in conversation with Aldrin. Ian Allis there speaking to us, a criminal law expert.